Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. And today I want to talk about server meshing. Fortunately, I recorded this entire video with the microphone muted, so we're going to do it again. But that's okay because this is a really interesting topic and I'm excited to talk a little bit about it. Now, the video that's playing behind you guys is from CitizenCon 2953, where CIG finally unveiled their working prototype for server meshing. Now, this is huge for the game because of CIG's vision for how it's going to be played. Now, I want to kind of start off this video by explaining the technology that CIG showed off at the presentation a little bit more in a wider sense. Now, previously, CIG had been using a database structure called iCache, and they decided to transition away from that to a new database structure called the entity graph. Now, the entity graph is a graph-based database, okay? And the entity graph is how they can do PES, or persistent entity streaming, because the entity graph is quick enough to update in basically real time what is being showed on the replication layer. So right now on a server, we have multiple services running at the same time. We have the simulation that is being run on the game server. We have the entity graph that's being run on the game server. We have the replication layer that's being run on the game server. And CIG is slowly separating these things out. So the entity graph is the database that basically updates what's going on the replication layer. And the replication layer is basically everything that we're seeing that the simulation is being built off of. Now, what you're seeing on screen here is actually object containers. So object containers is essentially how CIG can have this huge seamless system on a single server, because when you're in an object container, that is essentially when you have the highest level of detail. CIG is streaming in all the data on the object container that you're currently in, and the further away object containers, that data is essentially being streamed out. So the game server doesn't have to simulate as much. So the game server, the server that you're on, is handling all of the simulation. So what you're seeing in this picture is essentially different object containers with different color coding, okay? The idea is to have a server exist in each object container. That way, they can handle things a little bit more efficiently. And what you saw in the presentation is essentially a player walking in between object containers and in between different servers. So in the initial implementation of server meshing, they're going to essentially have Stanton as one giant object container and Pyro as one giant object container, and a server assigned to those object containers. Then the replication layer will sit on top of that with the entity graph being updated. And this combination of services will be a single instance of the game. So currently a single instance of the game is basically the same thing, but one server is handling all of that. Now, multiple servers will be handling that. So the replication layer with the entity graph, that will exist on one server, and the simulation of the game, that will exist on a separate server. So the simulation of Stanton, that will be on one server, and the simulation of Pyro, that will be on one server in their own object container. Now, object containers are nested. So you can have your ship be an object container, a city can be an object container, a station can be an object container, a planet can be an object container. So CIG has assigned object containers to multiple aspects of the game. And these object containers can already be dynamically defined And in that way, CIG can dynamically stream things in and out seamlessly. So because CIG already has access to that technology, all they have to do now is assign servers to those object containers. And that's how we get dynamic server meshing. So in a static server mesh, a server will be permanently assigned to an object container like that. So let's say that Crusader is an object container. CIG will say, okay, there will always be a server for Crusader. That is a static mesh. A dynamic mesh is essentially, I am a player and I am headed to the Moon Walla. Right now, there's no players on the Moon Walla, so it is streamed out. But as I arrive on Walla, a server is spooled up for the planet Walla that I'm on. So when I reach to Walla, I am now on a new server because there was no players on Walla before. It was streamed out. It didn't have an object container. Now Walla is being streamed in. It is a new object container and a new server can be assigned to it. So strictly speaking, this technology can scale. And the reason why it can scale is because they are assigning servers to object containers, and the replication layer and the entity graph essentially updates everything. So the simulation is being updated by this information. Okay, so the replication layer, basically that server just handles services. It doesn't have to handle the simulation. So the idea with that is that it is less likely for those servers to crash. So right now, because one server handles all of the game services and the simulation, it is more likely to crash, and that's why we see a lot of 30Ks, because it is handling all of the entities, is handling all of the services. It is just bogged down. But by separating the replication layer and putting a lot of those services, game services, on its own dedicated server, then the game servers only have to handle the simulation. So the game servers are handling the simulation, and the replication layer servers are handling the services. Okay, so by separating those two things, you can kill the simulation, and because all of those services are still running, you can bring a new server in and rebuild the simulation. So that's essentially what's happening in the first iteration of server meshing. Okay, so that kind of puts into question how the server mesh works in terms of instances. So a single instance will essentially be the entity graph with the replication layer and crash recovery, the services going on one server, then the Pyro system on one server, and the Stanton system on one server. Those three servers are handling a single instance of the game. Where right now, because of how the entity graph works, and because the replication layer is tied to the game servers, when you leave a coffee cup or a bottle on the ground, it belongs to that server. The replication layer does not replicate that information on other servers because the replication layer belongs to that server. So right now, when you drop a bottle in one server, that event only exists on that server. Okay, but when CIG separates the replication layer from the game servers, they can update that event across any server. And that is huge, because that means that something that I do on one server can be replicated on every server in the game. that's why CIG is now talking about base building. Okay, so when you build a base on a planet, that event gets recorded by the entity graph and the game servers running on the replication layer server. And the replication layer server can essentially tag that thing, that event, and say that this is a persistent event and update it on all of the servers that need it. Okay, so you can essentially have a base on Microtech on one server and then go to another server and your base on Microtech will still be there. So the replication layer separation is huge, and it's, you know, in my opinion, that's why CIG is talking about base building finally being possible and happening sooner than we think. Because right now, technically, a lot of people look at their ship as their base. You can land on a planet, and when you log back in, you're put back in that ship, because in the database, the replication layer has essentially tagged that event as nestled in or belonging to this event. So when the replication layer is separated, events like that can be stored and shared. Okay, so basically this also leads to another question. How many instances of the game are there going to be? Because we now understand that the replication layer and the servers, that is one instance. So whether that is a dynamic mesh or a static mesh. So how many instances is CIG going to use? And I kind of posted this question in the community tab of YouTube and on Reddit, if players would want a regional, if players wanted regional instances or a single instance. So basically, I'm calling them instances, but CIG calls them shards. So a shard is essentially multiple servers and the replication layer. Okay, so that is a shard. So the question is, well, the goal is, originally the goal was that Star Citizen would have one shard and everybody would connect to it, and there would be dynamic servers popping in and out of existence assigned to different object containers as players go to different locations, but the replication layer would essentially handle all of the servers. Now, the replication layer being assigned specifically to a few servers in one shard. Let's say that shard is a North American shard. Let's say there's a European shard, EU, and there's an AU Australian shard to handle, you know, the Asia Pacific region. And the poll was kind of interesting because now, again, as we talked about with base building, if you built a base on a planet, that would be replicated to all the other shards. So strictly speaking, if you had regional shards, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. You would still be able to go to your base on the Australian shard, and you would still be able to go to your base on the EU shard. So strictly speaking, as a player, you wouldn't feel that much of a difference with regional shards versus a single, you know, worldwide shard, because the replication layer is separated. It would technically feel the same. And right now, you can do that. An EU player can play on NA servers, and an NA player can play on Australian servers. You can pick the region of the servers that you want to play on. The latency will just be worse. So in a situation with regional shards, you would be able to go to the AU shard, you would be able to go to the EU shard, no problem, and your base would still be on those shards. So for all intensive purposes, it would feel a lot like, you know, a worldwide universe playing in the game, but the latency would just be specifics. And a lot of people seem to be okay with this. So now I'm going to go over to the poll and kind of just show you the results. So yeah, there's still a lot of time before the poll ends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to this poll in the video description below, so you guys have an opportunity to vote and kind of talk about it. So 205 people chose regional and 64 people chose single shard. And then I also did this poll on the community section of YouTube. I will also have that linked in the video description, so you guys can also vote on that. Both these polls are still live right now. YouTube was a little bit closer. 62% of people want continental regional shards, and 38 people want a single instance. So yeah, in my opinion, server meshing is a very interesting technology, and a lot of people look at this year's CitizenCon as that kind of pivot point in the development of the game, because not only did they show off Star Engine and Squadron 42, but CIG really told us what their plans were for this game moving forward. So now it's a little less speculation and a little bit more confirmation of not only what they plan to do, but they've already started doing it. So it's not just reassuring, but it gives us the ability to finally give them feedback on the things that they've shown. And that's kind of what the whole purpose of this video is about. I want to hear from the community, and I want to see what they think about the technology that CIG showed off at this year's CitizenCon and what they want for the future of the game. Personally, I think that either way, we're going to get that iteration of the feature. So realistically speaking, I think that we are going to get the static server mesh in 2024. This is the separation of the replication layer, Pyro on one server, Stanton on another server, and then in 2025 we're going to start to see CIG doing more with dynamic server meshing, because what they said is that this technology scales because servers are attached to these object containers, and as an object container is streamed in, they will be able to spool up a server and assign it to that object container, and this is a whole seamless experience. So I think it's an exciting time for the game, and let me know what you guys think. This video has gone on pretty long. I don't want to take up too much of you guys' time, so that's pretty much going to be it for me here in today's video. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel, liking the video, commenting. I've even gotten responses from other content creators, and it's really exciting to pick their brain about everything that's happening in the game. I enjoy this community a lot. That's why I make YouTube videos. A lot of these content creators inspired me to start talking about this game and making videos about it. So thank you to everybody who has liked the videos and are engaging with the content. The channel is growing tremendously, and I cannot thank you guys enough. So like I always say here at the end of these videos, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Salute.